Hello and welcome to Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. I'm Becky Parker-Geist and I'm your host. Audiobook Connection is your place to learn about the audiobook creative process and for authors to learn valuable tips on producing and marketing your audiobooks. This podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Thanks for joining me today. This episode is going to be focused on the kinds of questions that you'll want to be asking if you're searching for an audiobook producer. If you are working directly with a narrator and you're acting as your own producer, then these questions would still be valuable to you because you want to be thinking through many of these different topics that we're going to cover. So we're going to jump right in. The first thing that you'll want to be asking about is casting. How does it work with the producer that you're potentially going to work with? How many options are you going to get? Or do you go to some web page and have to listen to a certain number of samples? And if that's the case, then how many samples do you need to wade through? Or what is their search capability within their database? So if you're going to hunt for your own, then you should be asking questions about that. And then what if you don't find the voice that you're looking for? What does that mean? If they're doing the casting for you, then you'll want to know how much say do you get in the final choice? And how do they determine who they go to look for? Is there some kind of process? Are they asking questions about the kind of voice you're looking for? So you really want to get a feel for how does the casting process work, and then also a time frame, especially if you have some kind of launch deadline or goal in mind as to when that process will be complete or when your audiobook will be complete. You'll want to have a sense of about how long does the casting process take. You might also want to ask about who is handling their casting and what is that system like. That can be really valuable information. If what they're doing is plugging information into a computerized sorting system, you're going to have a lot less of that human touch or that human ear attending to the kinds of qualities that you're looking for. So these are questions that you'll want to ask about casting. The next thing we're going to cover is about your manuscript preparation. This really has a lot to do with the front and back matter of your book, things like acknowledgments or resources, appendices. It can also include information within the book, and we cover a lot of these kinds of topics on this podcast as to how you might deal with these different, more complex issues or opportunities. So things like sidebars, visuals that may be in your text, footnotes or endnotes. Who is going to help you, if anyone, with the manuscript preparation? Or are they expecting you to deliver a ready-to-record text that they're going to then just do the recording of? Now, here's the secondary question there is, if they say the latter, that they want you to deliver the text ready to record, then you may want to ask if they provide any kind of guidance in that process, because it can be a maze. There can be a lot of confusing elements. And as I say, we cover many of these in this podcast, and you can look back at some of the episodes that we have done, and hopefully you'll listen to some of those too. But, there are really a lot of potential, what could feel like hiccups or challenges, but they don't have to be. They can be opportunities. So how much support is the audiobook producer going to provide in that manuscript preparation process? So these are really good questions to ask. Another question that you'll want to be checking in on, especially if you have not yet launched or published your print and or ebook editions, or if you have just recently and are still feeling like, well, I might tweak something. You may be at that point with your book, and that's completely fine. But you'll want to check with your audiobook producer to ask, what happens if when I listen to the audiobook of the recording of the text that I'm providing to you, and I feel like, oh, at least in this audiobook edition, it would feel better if I wrote it slightly differently. Maybe if I made it sound a little more conversational in this particular aspect of it. These are most often going to be issues in the nonfiction world, but these are definitely things that you'll want to be checking on. The question is, if you do some text rewriting, what happens? Will they re-record that? And if so, are they going to charge you extra? And how much extra? So these are questions that you'll want to check with your audiobook producer on, especially if you feel like there's a chance you may want to do some rewrite. We have certainly had clients who had their books published, they were ready to go, but then in the audiobook process, there was a recognition that, when I hear it, it makes me want to modify the text. And so we've been able to work with our clients to be able to help them and support them in that process of modifying what they had written and then have it work even better in their audiobook edition. Another question you'll want to be asking is, what if when you review the audiobook, you would like to have changes made that are not necessarily errors in the read in terms of the words that are read? So it might be word perfect, but the tone isn't quite right. Now, many times this could be in a fiction audiobook where you feel like, that character really, I meant for them to sound more in this direction, but the narrator didn't interpret it that way. And these are the kinds of issues that can come up, and you'll want to know from your audiobook producer if they will implement those kinds of changes, not just text error changes. And related to that are pronunciation errors. Now, as you are, I'm certain, aware, there are many words in the English language that have more than one way that they can be pronounced. And they can, let's say, like a word has two different pronunciations, and they can both be legitimate pronunciations. But what if you have a preference and the narrator picked the other option? Or what if with a character name, for example, and the one that always comes to mind because I have a friend who is very particular about the pronunciation of her name, Andrea, versus Andrea or Andrea, and there are probably more versions of that name. But what if you have a character name, or even someone you know, but a character name that is pronounced a certain way, and you had it in your mind, but you didn't think to tell your narrator what that pronunciation was? Just didn't occur to you. What happens then? With a name that's going to be running throughout the book, I would, in that particular case, just advise that you let it go, that it probably won't matter to anyone else except you. But again, what we're talking about today is questions to ask your audiobook producer. Let's take just a short break. We'll come right back and cover a few important aspects. I'd like to take a moment to tell you about one of our latest innovations. Here at Pro Audio Voices, we've come up with a system to help our clients gain control over the launch of their audiobooks. With Amplify, you'll start with a beautiful custom sales landing page for your audiobook. You set the retail price, and you can run promotional pricing and get discount codes for special event offerings or any other reason at any time. Not only that, with Amplify, you'll earn a whopping 65% of your royalties based on the amount you sell each audiobook for. And remember, that's all pricing you control. But we're taking it to the next level by adding in a series of emails with step-by-step tutorials on how to use that landing page once you've got it. If you're looking for a way to control your launch, your pricing, and get paid just 3 days after each sale is made, then schedule a call with me at proaudiovoices.com. Please note that Amplify is available exclusively to the production clients of Pro Audio Voices and to those who join our audiobook marketing program. We hope you'll join us. All right, let's talk a little bit about that next step in the audiobook production process that you may not even be thinking about yet, but these are also good questions to ask early on because eventually you're going to get to the point where you need to know the answers to these questions. And if at this point, further down the road where you're already working together, you find that you have a conflict around this part, this either submissions aspect or the reviewing process, then that can be really awkward and difficult. So better to get all these things handled up front. Make sure that you've asked all the important questions in the beginning. So the next piece is the review. You're going to want to ask if the audio files are actually reviewed by another human being in between the narrator recording them and you as the client listening to them. Here's why. Just as with editing, and you're probably as an author, very aware of this, is that, books receive typically multiple edits by multiple different editors. And the reason is because we can't catch everything, and it's also true with narrating. When you're narrating a book, even when you go back to edit your own work, often the brain, being such a miraculous thing, will fill in pieces or convert information, and we can miss things. So it's really valuable to have an additional set of ears who listen to the audiobook before you get it for your review. And then the next element is about bonus materials. If bonus materials are something that you think might be helpful to you, this is going to be true whether you're a fiction or a nonfiction author, having bonus materials can really be very valuable. What are your options around that? Do you need to provide those separately? Will they help you with those? Is an interview a possibility if that's something you're interested in? Will they be able to provide any guidance around the kinds of bonus materials that might best suit your particular work? And then, of course, how much help will they provide in terms of that implementation? The other piece around that, of course, is does that affect your cost? And then the last couple pieces are around the submissions process. And so the first is about metadata. Metadata is so important. And it is also often so confounding to authors. And so the questions you want to ask are about your metadata. Will your producer provide any kind of helpful support in that area? Do they have expertise in that? What is their experience in the publishing world and the metadata world? Is this audiobook producer that you're conversing with somebody who has the expertise to help you in that arena? And if so, what kind of help do they provide? Are they going to just gather the information? This is also assuming that they do the submissions process, and not all audiobook producers will do that. So you will also want to check on that. You'll want to ask them if they handle the submissions process, and if they do, how they do that. So who is their digital distributor, and how, what is your distribution and the breadth of your reach going to be when working with this particular audiobook producer? Let's say, for example, they only distribute through ACX. Well, if your goal is to reach the widest possible audience, that's not going to be a good choice for you. So you want to think about these things and make sure you ask these questions up front. Also, coming back to the metadata, are they going to take a look at your book description? And do they have the expertise to provide any kind of valuable feedback to you on that? And if they do, Will they provide that, or is that something they charge extra for? These are, again, more questions that you'll want to check in with them about. And then the last piece that you'll want to check on is whether they provide any kind of marketing support. If you're going to do an audiobook, then you certainly want to be planning on marketing because, as with publishing, if you put something out there, you need to do marketing in order for your audience to find it. So it's really, really important to have the marketing piece in place, have a marketing plan. And if your audiobook producer can help with that, find out what kind of help they provide and what the costs are that are related to them. So if you have any further questions or questions about these questions, or would like to have a conversation with me, I would be happy to schedule a time with you. You can find us at proaudiovoices.com. And you can also email with further questions if you'd like any support. Thanks so much for joining me. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for joining us for Audiobook Connection, behind the scenes with the creative teams. Please take a moment to subscribe at audiobookconnection.com. The podcast is sponsored by Pro Audio Voices, helping great stories come alive through audiobook production and marketing. Learn more at proaudiovoices.com. Again, thanks for being with us, and please join us next week.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.